For our first test drive, we're going to take a look at using the IPython Interactive Mode, and for this purpose we'll use it as a very simple calculator. Now, there are a few things that we want to present as part of this video. The key one is how to execute snippets of code in this interactive mode in which you're going to see immediate results as you execute each snippet of code. The mechanism that enables that to work is known as a REPL, a read, eval, print loop. Basically what's going to happen is you'll type some code, then press enter. The REPL, or IPython specifically, will read in the code that you type, evaluate that code, print the result, then display a new prompt at which you can enter more code and repeat that process, thus the concept of the loop. So a read, eval, print loop. Now, many languages are now offering REPLs to enable you to do this kind of interactivity. So for example, if you're coming over from Java, you might be familiar with the JShell tool. Microsoft now has REPLs available for certain languages, and there's lots of other languages that provide REPLs as well. At the end of this particular video, we'll also demonstrate how to exit the IPython Interactive Mode. Now, in order to work with IPython Interactive Mode, we're going to have to open a command line window for your particular operating system. I'm assuming that you've already viewed the Before You Begin video to get your system set up correctly. If you have not, please stop this video now and go back and watch the Before You Begin video. But as a matter of review here, the way to open up a command line for your particular operating system is as follows. If you're working with Mac OS, you'll use the Terminal app, which you'll find in the Applications folders, Utilities subfolder. If you're on Windows, you're going to want to open the Anaconda Prompt from your Start menu, and I'm going to take a temporary diversion over to Windows in just a moment here to talk a little bit more about that Anaconda Prompt. And finally, if you're on Linux, this is going to depend on your particular distribution of Linux. You'll either open a terminal window if you have one, or you can simply work with any shell window as well. Now, let me switch over to my Windows virtual machine for a moment here and talk a little bit more about the Anaconda Prompt. I like, when I'm working with something frequently in Windows, to have an icon down here on the taskbar that I can simply click to access anytime I want. So I'm going to talk about getting that Anaconda Prompt down there. Now, you may recall from the Before You Begin video that when you're using the Anaconda Prompt and you want to do anything that's going to modify your Anaconda installation, you have to run the Anaconda Prompt as administrator on your computer. So I'm going to talk about how you could set up a shortcut that always runs as administrator. That way you don't have to worry about setting up the administrator execution every single time you want to do an install of a new package. So if you click your Start button and scroll down to the A's, you'll find the Anaconda installation shortcut, and it's a folder. And if you expand that folder, within there you'll see the Anaconda Prompt. Now, what I like to do is right-click that and go to More and Open File Location, which is actually going to show the folder containing that shortcut. And I'm just going to copy that shortcut and I'm going to paste it onto my desktop. So now I have the Anaconda Prompt shortcut easily accessible to me. Now, if I right-click that and select Properties, under the Advanced option here on the Shortcut tab, I can check off Run as Administrator, and then every time I use this specific shortcut to run the Anaconda Prompt, it's going to ask me if I'm okay with it running as administrator. So if you want that convenience, you can do that here. I'll go ahead and click OK and click OK again. So now if I double click to open that, you can see it's prompting me to ask if I want to give it access with the user account control dialog here. That's because I specifically said run this thing as administrator. Now you'll notice that my Anaconda prompt popped up with a white background and black text. That's because I actually modified the defaults already for this particular shortcut. You can do that by going to this defaults option, and I went to the colors tab and changed the background to white and the screen text to black just to make it a little bit more readable for these videos. The default is to have a black background with white text, but you can customize that however you like. And then finally, if you want to have this on the taskbar, you can simply drop it down here on the taskbar, and now anytime you want to access the Anaconda prompt, it's right there for you. You simply have to click it once, and if you set it up to run as administrator, agree to do that, and then the window will come up on the screen. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to my Mac OS side, if you will, and we're going to continue this lesson. So for the purpose of this lesson, let me get out of my PowerPoint here for a moment, and I'm going to go and open up a terminal window. I put the terminal shortcut here at the bottom of my Mac OS screen so that I can access it easily, but if you don't know how to get to the terminal, you could simply go to your search box and type terminal, and it will find the app and enable you to load it from there as well. Now, for the purpose of this particular video, you don't have to worry about changing the folder that is the default folder displayed here in the terminal window. This is just my user account folder. For the next video, we'll talk about changing folders into the examples that you downloaded as part of the Before You Begin section. But here what we want to do is start out by launching the IPython interpreter, and the command IPython will do that for you. Now, the first time you launch it, sometimes it takes a few seconds extra. In this case, it happened to have popped up really quickly. The text that gets displayed will be dependent on the version of Anaconda that you installed. So as of right now, the version of Python that's installed on my system is Python 3.7.1. When we wrote our materials, the book was based on 3.7.0. And then separately, we're also working with IPython, the interpreter, version 7.3.0 at this point in time. Now, once you launch the IPython interpreter and get to this point, the stuff that you see in your command line window is going to basically be the same across all three operating systems. The coloring might be a little bit different, the fonts might be a little bit different, but the results should be the same with a few minor exceptions. So for example, floating point numbers may be represented a little bit differently across systems, so numbers like 7.3. And when you start working with floating point arithmetic, there can be slight rounding errors, so you may see slight differences in numeric values as you do calculations, mostly in the digits very far to the right of the decimal point. But other than that, you should see the same results as I show you across all the examples that we present. So what you're seeing here is known as an in prompt. Every time you see an in prompt, you are capable of typing a snippet of code to execute. So for example, let's say we want to do a simple arithmetic expression. We want to add the numbers 45 and 72. Python, like all programming languages, has arithmetic operators, and for the most part those look like the same operators that you're used to in math, but we have to write expressions in programming languages in straight line form, meaning left to right across the statement or snippet of code that we're typing. So if I press enter, you can see the immediate feedback is presented in an out prompt. The numbering is the snippet number. So for snippet number 1, we executed the expression 45 plus 72, and the result of that was 117 displayed in an out prompt for that same snippet number. So that's a very simple arithmetic expression, and of course we can do more complex ones as well. So let's say we wanted to multiply 5 times the quantity 12 12.7, and we'll subtract 4 from that, and then we'll divide by 2. Now, before I execute this, for those of you who may be less familiar with how math works in the context of a programming language, operators have precedence just like they do in regular arithmetic. The multiplication and division operators, which don't look like what you might expect if you're not used to doing programming, those are of course different symbols because the symbols we use have to be on the keyboard in order to write arithmetic expressions. But just like in regular math, parentheses may be used to force the order of evaluation. So subtraction has lower precedence than multiplication and division. Therefore, if we want to perform the subtraction first, we have to wrap that in parentheses. So 12.7 minus 4 is going to give us 8.7. Then we'll multiply that by 5 and divide the result by 2. These two operators have the same level of precedence, and in all but one case in Python, operators evaluate left to right. So you do the multiplication in this case before the division. And we'll talk more about operator precedence in lesson 2 when we show you all of the arithmetic operators and talk about them in a little bit more detail. So when I go ahead and press enter, I immediately see the result, 21.75. If you want, you can go try that by hand on the side to make sure it came out correctly. And just as a point of emphasis, the forcing of the subtraction to happen first with parentheses, we can see that we get different results if we remove those parentheses. So I just want to show you a little trick inside of IPython. If you want to re-execute a snippet that you did previously, you can use your up arrow key to recall that previous snippet, and I'm going to do it again just so you can see I can also recall 45 plus 72. You can also use the down arrow key to go in the opposite direction. So let's say I want to re-execute this snippet without the parentheses. I can use my left and right arrow keys to work my way through the expression and then use the delete or backspace key to remove characters. So here's the same expression without the parentheses, and in this case the multiplication will happen first, the division will happen second, and then we'll subtract the results. So we'll do 5 times 12.7, we'll do 4 divided by 2, and then we'll subtract from the result of 5 times 12.7 the result of this division, which is 2, and see the final result, which in this case is 61.5. So at this point, what I'd like you to do is on your own go ahead and try these expressions just to get a feel for it, and separately go ahead and execute this expression as well. I'm going to tell you to pause the video while you do this on your own and then come back here. So go ahead and execute this expression 2 ways. One with the parentheses, then recall that expression and execute it again without the parentheses. So go ahead and pause the video now and give that a shot. So now let me go ahead and execute this expression. So as you can see, 5 times the quantity, 3 plus 4, or 7, gives us 35. And again, if I recall that snippet and delete the parentheses, then I'm going to get 5 times 3 first, and we'll add 4 to that result for a value of 19. So for those of you who are coming from other programming languages, excuse me, you can see that expressions evaluate the way you might expect from other C-based programming languages. Now, when you're done with a IPython session, you can exit that session a couple of different ways. You can actually type exit and press enter, and you'll be returned to your system's command prompt. Let me go back into IPython for a moment here. Separately, you can use Control D, the letter D like David, at your command prompt to terminate the IPython session. So if I type Control D once, then you'll see this prompt, do you really want to exit? If you simply press enter, the default value yes will be input automatically for you, and IPython will terminate. You can also type a Y, and if you did it by accident, you can always type N and press enter to stay inside of IPython. And then finally, for those of you who are on Mac OS or Linux, you can type Control-D twice and it will immediately execute the IPython interpreter. We're now done with the first of our 3 test drives. I just want to point out a couple of minor things about the expressions that we looked at up above here. Anytime you see a whole number value like 5 or 3 or 4 in Python, that is what we refer to as an integer value. Anytime you see a number with a decimal point in it, like 12.7, in these 2 expressions here, that's what we refer to as a floating point number. As you'll see, there are types associated with data that you use in your Python applications, although in Python you typically don't explicitly specify those types. So Python knows that a whole number is an integer, or the actual data type is called int, and it knows that 12.7 is a floating point number and the actual data type is called float. And we'll be talking about int and float and other data types in more detail starting in lesson 2.